Senator Ossoff, you've been very patient. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for your focus on technology as well. And in that vein, General Nakasone,
could we check whether we are being listened into
moment.
at this point, or maybe you want to switch microphones?
Mr. Chairman, we should probably get that looked at. Maybe General Nakasone can. But speaking of technology and General Nakasone, General, I have an offer I think you can't refuse. You have, of course, tremendous assets and personnel in Georgia, NSA Georgia, the Cyber Center for Excellence at Fort Gordon, just around the corner from Augusta University's Cyber Center as well, an academic resource there. And I would like to invite you to join me, and perhaps we can get some barbecue and pecan pie as well, to visit with your personnel at NSA Georgia and or at the Georgia Tech Research Institute, which, based in Atlanta but with facilities across the country, is conducting much of the advanced research consistent with the Chairman's commitment to technology as a key frontier in our national security. So will you join me in Georgia, General?
I will, Senator.
Looking forward to that and appreciate the commitment. Speaking of Georgia, Director Haynes, the assessment warns, quote, Russia is particularly focused on improving its ability to target critical infrastructure, including underwater cables, and that, quote, the PLA Navy and Air Force already are the largest in the region, meaning the Indo-Pacific region, and continue to field advanced platforms that improve China's ability to try to establish air superiority and project power beyond the first island chain. The assessment doesn't make explicit mention of the submarine domain, but during the Navy's posture hearing last year before Vasask, the CNO testified that submarines are the highest demand capability in both Indo-PACOM and EUCOM. We have the Kings Bay submarine base in Georgia. I want to ask you first, do you share our military's assessment that the undersea domain is critical and one in which we presently enjoy unique advantages?
Yes, absolutely.
And so what I want to ask you to work with my office on is if and as the Navy considers activities at Kings Bay and some of the emerging capabilities and technologies in the undersea domain and their potential presence or augmentation at Kings Bay, that you'll work with me to determine how the intelligence community can provide intelligence support to those efforts. Will you work with my office on that, Director?
Yes, absolutely, Senator.
Thank you. Remaining focused on Georgia, we have the third busiest deepwater port in the country, and Director Wray, as a Georgian, you know this. Ports are critical infrastructure, yes?
Absolutely.
And there are threats to our ports and threats that move through our ports. We've seen foreign intelligence services try to infiltrate, according to public reporting. In the Wall Street Journal, for example, intelligence gathering equipment through U.S. ports. There's a risk of drug trafficking through U.S. ports, human trafficking through U.S. ports. Director Wray, I'd like to ask you to redouble a commitment you've made to me in the past to ensure that the FBI is fully focused on protecting the Port of Savannah and other seaports across the country.
We're very focused on port security. I haven't forgotten our previous conversations on the subject, both in Savannah, but also in places like Norfolk and other significant ports around the United States. And certainly a lot of the comments that occurred earlier about other technologies and the Chinese government's ability to advance their agenda at our expense apply in spades to ports and port technology and port services.
So speaking of ports and critical infrastructure, I'd like to hear from you on this, Director Wray, and then also from Director Haynes. Director Wray, what are the capabilities that you lack that require the DHS Office of Intelligence and Analysis to undertake its own with respect to the protection of, for example, ports or other critical infrastructure? And Director Haynes, so you can contemplate it for a moment before I come to you, the question I'm going to ask you is why we require an independent intelligence office at the Department of Homeland Security and why the FBI can't do that work. Go ahead, Director.
Well, I think we work well and closely with that office at DHS. I don't know that I could point to a specific thing that we lack, but certainly more players on the field is a useful exercise.
Well, sometimes, unless there's duplication or overlap or inefficiency, right?
There is that. I will say that what we focus on the most, and it relates to the overall theme of technology here from a different way, is that we in the FBI and to some extent throughout the intelligence community have a big data problem, to use the cliche, of our own, right? Which is that in every investigation, every intelligence analysis, the amount of data that is available or that is being reviewed has exploded over the last few years. If you just look at a typical FBI case, we've, in one active shooter situation, for example, to pick something simple, we've had ones where we've had more data pour in than the entire Library of Congress in just one investigation. So the ability to have tools and people who can get through that data as quickly as possible to figure out the important leads, to marshal that data, whether that's AI, whether that's data analysts, all those sorts of things become incredibly important to this community's ability to marshal the data and to inform the people who need to be informed.
With the chairman's permission, could Director Haynes answer my question as well, Mr. Chairman? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. There are a number of missions that DHS and FBI have in relation to domestic intelligence work that's being done across the nation, where they're really taking the lead. And, when you look at, for example, cybersecurity issues related to critical infrastructure in the United States, CISA within DHS obviously has an incredibly important role to play, as does the FBI in working with the private sector and with others on these contexts. And the advantage, I think, of having intel elements, for example, in both the FBI and at DHS is that they're able to work most closely under essentially with their agency and under those authorities to help to support effectively the mission that those agencies are taking. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Director. We'll follow up. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're through the